Welcome everybody, and thank you for coming. I'd like to introduce our group. We are the Tigers. I'm Adam Shag, Earthman. We have Michael Womack and Tasha Davis. And we are here to give you some important information on the hazard that is Mount Rainier. Show you how you can help save lives and properties of Seattle residents. So let's just assume that you're a typical Seattle resident. Let's say maybe your name is Macklemore. Any name will do. And it is a Monday, and it's a business day, and you're in the city center, and it's around noon. Everyone's going to lunch, and you go out to Pike Place Market to get some coffee. And suddenly, Mount Rainier erupts. No, this is not science fiction. And yes, this could actually happen. So in preparation for this talk, we studied all the reports on Mount Rainier, and all of them came to a similar consensus that Mount Rainier is an active volcano, and that it is going to erupt, and it is going to erupt explosively. These quotes say there's an active volcano, and it's one of the most dangerous in the world. It's not a question of if, but when the next volcanic event will occur. So, also an important study of Rainier was the United Nations Decade Volcano Study. Basically, the United Nations hired a bunch of volcanoes to go out and find the 17 most potentially deadly and disruptive volcanoes. As you can see, Mount Rainier is one of these volcanoes. And this report already has produced some results, good and bad. In the case of Galeras in Colombia, soon after the report was published, the volcano actually erupted and caused some fatalities. But a good example of what we want from this report is what happened in Italy in regards to Mount Etna, is some mitigation techniques to help save lives and property if it continues the way it is. So now that I've said that Mount Rainier is an active volcano, and it is explosive and is going to cause a big deal in Seattle, public perception is very concerning on the matter of Mount Rainier. The Washington Military Department commissioned a study about their mitigation techniques if Mount Rainier erupts. And they said it was very surprising to discover the level of knowledge on the hazards that mountain represents to the communities that surround it. There was and is a strong assumption by people that the mountain is extinct or at worst dormant. And as we can see from what I've told you, is active and explosive. Also, they equated people's knowledge of volcanoes to Hawaiian volcanoes, which is a very different type of eruption than Mount Rainier. And if Rainier erupts, you're not going to be able to watch it. It is going to be very dangerous. So Mount Rainier has an eruptive history. There are 11 explosive eruptions since the last ice age. If you include non-pumice, non-explosive eruptions, it's a frequency of once every 100 years. And as you can see by this figure here shows the 11 eruptions since the last ice age. And as you can see, this is a non-uniform distribution. So our ability to predict when the next eruption will occur is not very good. So it can happen at any moment. So in regards to Seattle, we're worried about two hazards. We're worried about an ash cloud, and we're worried about lahars, which are a volcanic mudslide. In regards to ash, a volcanic ash is particles of rock and glass and gases that when erupt, get pushed into the stratosphere and diffused around the area just surrounding it and possibly hundreds and thousands of miles away. What's so concerning about ash is only a little bit of ash can cause major problems. Traffic can be disrupted because internal combustion engines stop working. The roads become slippery. Health hazard, you do not want to breathe this in. Water and power supply because of contamination and mechanical failure. Communication systems for similar reasons. And agricultural losses almost whole scale from only a small amount of ash. To think about what may happen if Rainier erupts, we looked at the Mount St. Helens case. In the case of Mount St. Helens, there was the largest city to be affected by ash was Yakima, which is 200 miles away from Mount St. Helens, and the ash reached it in 3.5 hours, and 18 hours of darkness. Now, based off what happened in Mount St. Helens, we estimate that ash, if there's a if there's a wind coming from the southeast in Seattle, would reach the city in 1 hour, cause darkness for a similar 18 hours, 3 to 5 inches of ash cover, more than enough to cause major problems. The second, potentially in the long-reaching hazard, are lahars. Like I said, lahars are volcanic mudslides. So basically, when the lava and heat comes from the volcano, it melts all the ice, and all this material gets shot down the river valleys and low points on the volcano. We are particularly worried about lahars in Mount Rainier because Mount Rainier has massive glaciation. It has more glaciers than any mountain in the lower 48 states, and more ice on top of it than all of the other Cascade volcanoes combined. So when we're talking about lahars and Mount Rainier, we're talking about big problems. The case study of the worst lahar from Mount Rainier is the Ossipole mud. The Ossipole mud flow happened around 5,000 years ago, and it was ignited by an eruption. And as you can see, it more than reached the Sound lowland. And currently, 150,000 people live on top of the Ossipole mud flow. And it's not as if this, and as we remember about lahars, it's almost like a concrete barrier that is rushing down a mountain at speeds of 50 miles an hour and can be 100 feet tall. So if this type of lahar would hit the lowland right now, it would cause complete losses. And also, not only the worst case scenario reaches the Puget Sound lowland, also a similar mud flow, the electron mud flow around 500 years ago, reached a significantly populated area. So we have a video of lahars in Japan just to show you the ferocity and destructive power of these creatures. As you can see, not much has a chance of withstanding anything coming from lahar. They can happen very quickly and be completely devastating. And like I said, Mount Rainier is particularly susceptible to lahars because of the amount of ice that is on the mountain. So, what are the probabilities that lahars will happen? Well, as you can, in this map, the pink is the large lahar scenario. So that's on par with the Ossipole mud flow. The probability of that happening is 1 in 10,000. And as you can see, it completely penetrates the Puget Sound lowland and goes into very populated areas. The white checkered part are a medium lahar zone, and that's a 500 chance of happening, which equates to a 1 in 7 chance of happening in any one of your lifetimes. So this is a significant risk. The solid white is the small lahar, and that's 1 in 100 chance of happening. But I'd like to point your attention to the green part. This is what we call a post-sedimentation zone. So this is after the lahar has happened. This zone is susceptible to floods, to mudslides, and to a lot of other hazards for a long time after the lahar has happened. And to put this into perspective, after Mount St. Helens, the lahar from Mount St. Helens, and after this post-sedimentation zone caused over $1 billion in damage for 10 years after that. So, and as you can see, the post-sedimentation zone goes into Seattle and into very populated areas. As far as a cost estimate, the total amount of property in lahar zones currently is $40 billion in assets. And when we're talking about lahars, remember we're talking about complete losses. So there's no salvaging anything. As you can see, if a lahar goes down any of the 3 main rivers leading to populated areas, there's going to be around $15 billion in assets that are susceptible. And given that post-sedimentation zone up the Durwash River, then we're looking at more $20 billion in damage. So these are significant sums that we need to pay attention to. To compound this risk, most homeowners insurance policies do not cover lahars. They cover direct actions of volcanoes like ash, but they do not cover mud flows from lahars. So we need to take action to mitigate some of these hazards, and Michael's going to talk to you about some of those further.
Alright, so due to the unpredictability of volcanic eruption, there was no prior warning. However, a resident is able to hear about the eruption on Twitter, radio, or on television. So what are its options? So this is a map of what the Lahar hazard zones for an eruption would likely be. The yellow is where the Lahars will actually reach, and then the purple is the post-sedimentation zone. At the top, you can see Seattle's in the red circle. So it's important to note that Seattle is not directly in the way of a Lahar. However, Lahars will stress Seattle, which we'll see later. So in the event of a volcanic eruption, Lahars will come down through highly populated areas south of Seattle, which will be forced to evacuate north into the southern region. And so here, where you see Macklemore, that's the downtown district, which approximately some people do every day for work. And in this area, there's approximately 500,000 people on a given workday. And in the southern half of Seattle, there's 700,000 people on a given workday. And so in this area, approximately 500,000 people, in the event of an eruption, will be trying to evacuate. And there are only 3 main bridges out of this area that go to the northern part of Seattle. So you have the 99, the I-5, and the 520. And in a current emergency situation, people are directed by street signs and other things to go to the main highways, which are I-9 or which are 99. And so you're going to have about 700,000 people trying to cross only 2 bridges. And you can probably tell that's not going to happen. Additionally, there will be 200,000 to 400,000 people coming in from the south that are trying to evacuate from the Lahars. So this is going to stress the traffic structure of Seattle greatly. Approximately 90 minutes after the eruption, ash will begin reaching the city, and 2 to 5 inches of ash will begin falling. And ash is extremely bad because it takes out power, it destroys machinery, especially combustion engines, which is really bad because in the gridlock scenario of Seattle, begin falling on lots of cars, lots of people are going to be outside their homes, and ash is extremely bad. It gets in your eyes. If you breathe it in, it's like breathing brittle glass. So it's a major health hazard, and we want to minimize the number of people outside. So what do we do to save Macklemore? So what USMAC can do is focus on resilience and quick response. So we want to stay and not evacuate. This is extremely important. You do not want to evacuate in the event of a volcanic eruption. For one, it's spreading over the entire Northwest, so you can't actually evacuate it. It's going to be falling everywhere. And 2, Seattle does not remotely have the infrastructure necessary to evacuate. So the best scenario is to remain indoors. And we'd want to outfit relief centers with air filtration systems, backup power. They would want to be able to provide first aid, and a variety of areas in Seattle that can do this. And we would want to fortify many critical infrastructure buildings, such as power plants, water protection plants, things like that, in order to prevent or to reduce the amount of damage done directly by ashfall. And the second thing we would want to do is educate. So people need to know that in the event of a volcanic eruption, they shouldn't be evacuating. We want as few people outside on the streets as possible. So in order to do this, we would have to give easy access to information in the event of eruption, telling people to stay inside, go home. This is easy to do through the radio, which just have to be played on TV networks, on radio networks. You can use the message system put in by the government. And additionally, there's a lot of information that's easily available online. It's published by the U.S. on how to deal with an ashfall in the event that it's in ashfall zone. So it's not hard to deal with, and people just simply need to know how to deal with ashfall. And so the third thing we want to do is to prepare in advance. So in the event of Mount St. Helens, there is very little advance warning, and in the event of Yakima, they basically had to deal with an ashfall as it hit them. They didn't even know what. They didn't even have a preparation. They just said, "Oh my gosh, there's an emergency. We need to start preparing." And so the first 24 hours.
I doubt they said, "Oh my gosh." I really doubt that.
Maybe a little worse, but they basically had 24 hours where they had to throw together an emergency plan. However, because of this emergency plan, we actually have a baseline that we can evaluate a plan on the Yakima situation. So providing first aid and supplies is crucial during the disaster. and having emergency kits prepared in advance with first aid, respirators, food, and water, because up to 7 days after the disaster, people will not be able to get clean water or food. And so here's a population density diagram in Seattle showing where the highest density population areas are, and these are the areas that are going to be. However, we also have to account for the people evacuating into Seattle from the lower zones. We want to distribute them evenly throughout Seattle into the lower population density zones. We want relief centers spread evenly throughout in order to accommodate everyone. So finally, we would want to focus on preemptive mitigation of the damage so that we would have currently we have up to 3 days warning, but it's unpredictable, and we're not entirely sure predict an eruption that accurately. However, there are ways to get ideally a 7-day period or a 7-day warning signal. And so we want to focus on preemptively, if we get the signal, preemptively preparing services for people, preparing cleanup services, have cleanup teams out in the cleanup effort immediately after the volcanic ash has finished falling, because this will bring the city back on its feet to reduce economic losses. Ideal situation, we would have a warning 7 days prior. Moore and various other families will begin stocking up on food and water. Shelters there, they would be staffed. They would stock up on supplies. 3 days prior, canceled. Shelters will begin bringing in the southern residents and accommodating them for the disaster. 1 day before, the city is in lockdown, and people will be staying at homes. They won't be trying to move around. They won't be trying to get supplies at the last second. Air vents will be closed, heating will be turned off, electricity will be turned off, machinery will be sealed away, so it's going to be damaged to us. And then Rainier erupts. During the day of the eruption, everybody remains in lockdown. The day after the eruption, emergency cleanup services are in full swing. 3 days later, people can begin getting out of their houses and attempting to help with the cleanup efforts. And then a week later, this resuming somewhat normal operation. So we hope that you see the risks of an imminent Mount Rainier eruption and the hazards that it brings, and accordingly. Thank you.
Good.